I'm a big fan of like action movies, and more than that, I'm a fan of like action books, really. So like The Lord of the Rings and things like that. And audiobooks are like my go-to thing right now. And so probably the last year, I've probably listened to probably 400 hours worth of audiobook. A lot of it's the same thing over and over. So everything that J.R. Tolkien ever wrote, for sure. Starting to branch out into things like C.S. Lewis and things like that. And I started the Iliad again. I remember reading that at one point and loving it, and it's boring me to death. It's basically like part of the Bible, but not interesting. And so I'm waiting for some action to happen. And so I'm going to read to you guys today a story actually from the Bible. And it's kind of cool because, I've been reading this story and just trying to draw from it. I really feel like there's a lot of things in this right now that apply to where we're at. And we brought a few kids out to, actually Espy here on the front, her brother ran a purity conference kind of thing. And we just were there the last couple days, and this was brought up momentarily. So I was like, that's kind of cool. Like, it makes me feel like I'm going the right way. But it's basically, Paul has just gotten done with his, he's just wrapped up his second great missionary journey. He's been arrested. He's been put in front of a few different people for trial. And basically what's happening here is that he's being transported to Rome to go to the big dogs and go on trial in front of some very big and important people. And so we're going to start there. I'm just going to read through this, if that's all right with you guys, and just kind of interject some things as we go. And it's going to be good. I'm going to step on some toes, but
praise God.
You come to this church that's, like, I don't know how you have toes left. So,
amen.
All right. So it says, when it was decided, this is in Acts 27, and it starts in verse 27. So I should have tipped them off on that, but if you guys think I'm a liar, you can look it up for yourself, or you should do it yourself if you got a Bible. But it says in verse 27, it says, when it was decided that we would sail for Italy, just so you know, this was most likely written by Luke. The book of Acts was most likely written by Luke, who was a doctor. And it says, when it was decided that we would sail for Italy, Paul and some other prisoners were handed over to a centurion named Julius, who belonged to the imperial regiment. That was a very prestigious regiment. It was a pretty big deal. This case that was surrounding Paul, and so they sent somebody important. He was part of that special task force, and it said, we boarded the ship, Holgrob, from Adamitium, and we were about to sail for ports along the coast of the province of Asia, and we would put out to sea. So Aristarchus, Macedonian, and from Thessalonica, they were with us. The next day we landed at Sidon, and Julius, in kindness to Paul, allowed him to go with his friends so that they might provide for his needs. Kind of cool. From there we put out to sea again, and we passed the lee of Cyprus because the winds were against us. It won't be the first time in this story that the winds are against these guys. It says, when we sailed across the open sea, off the coast of Cilicia and Pamphylia, we landed at Myra in Lycia. They really like the letter A a lot. Everything's got an A at the end. So there the centurion found an Alexandrian ship sailing for Italy, and it put us on board. Sometimes we forget that, like, Italy's in the Bible. Like, we forget that there's, in my mind, it's like this Jewish culture and the Roman culture have like a brief intersection in the story of Jesus. But I forget how much of that other stuff was going on in the world and how developed other parts of the world were at this time. It says that they were put on an Alexandrian ship. And we made slow headway for many days and had difficulty arriving off Cnidus. And when the wind did not allow us to hold our course, we sailed to the lee of Crete, opposite of Salmon. Jerry has brought us out the last couple years to do some canoeing out in the Boundary Waters. And this is just speaking that language to me right now where, this last year, the year before when Jerry was with us, it was just like heaven on earth, a little here and there, but you got somebody who's seasoned leading you, and the winds for the most part were obedient. And then last year we were without Jerry, without our expert, and the wind was just in our face the entire time. And so I was like, I read this and I hurt deep inside because I've been here. It says, we moved along the coast with difficulty, and we came to a place called Fair Havens. That sounds like it's in Prescott or something. Near the town of Lasea. So much time had been lost, and sailing had already become dangerous because by now it was after the Day of Atonement, meaning it would have been like late September, early October. The sailing seasons were different between Jews and between Greeks, but for the most part, this kind of points out that it was probably getting pretty late in the year. This wasn't like travel nowadays where you just hop in and, in a day or two you can go. I think I looked it up once. It was like 2,000 total miles, so it's a long ways they had to do this thing. And with the wind in your face, it can get pretty scary. So Paul warned them, "Men, I can see that our voyage is going to be disastrous and great loss to the cargo and the ship, and also our own lives." But the centurion, instead of listening to what Paul said, followed the advice of the pilot and the owner of the ship. Since the harbor was unsuitable to winter in, the majority decided that we should sail on, hoping to reach Phoenix. Who is ever hoping to reach Phoenix? Hoping to reach Phoenix and winter there. This was a harbor in Crete, facing both southwest and northwest. So I guess it's like at an angle. I don't know. I was like, how does it face both southwest and must be at an angle? I'm going to say you really can't blame the centurion in this moment. Paul at this time would have been a slave with a lot of other slaves, and so it's actually very possible if you look up what these Alexandrian ships looked like, most of the time all of those people who were prisoners would have been put down under the deck, down toward the back of the boat, and so ironically there was an easy access to dump them out if you needed to, which is that'd be pretty scary to look at all day. So it's very possible that at this point Paul is speaking from intuition and just feeling, or maybe the Lord's speaking through him, or maybe he's just an intelligent guy, and I'd say it's most likely the third, and you'll see why when I say that in a minute. But at the same time, the centurion is putting his trust in people who've been here, who've sailed the route, who know what they're doing. He's put his trust in a ship that this ship would have been able to probably carry. Most of these Alexandrian ships could have carried anywhere between 300 and 500 people. Like it would have been a very significant ship, plus all the cargo that's on it. This thing's built for it, and so. Were you going to listen to the experience and trust in the vessel, or are you going to listen to that one, know-it-all slave or prisoner that's in the, under the deck? And so I don't really blame him for this, but I would say that it's important in your lives to remember that God will speak to you, and God will give you direction, and God will give you counsel from very unexpected places. And I've found in my own life a lot of times that your first assumption of somebody is not always the most accurate. And your first assumption of their position, especially in relation to you in your life, in your position, it's not always the way that it looks. And so I don't blame the centurion for this, honestly. I don't think anybody should or could. He did what he had to do. Moving on. It says that when a gentle south wind began to blow, they saw their opportunity, and they weighed anchor, and they sailed along the shore of Crete. Another version, it says when this wind picked up, they thought they saw what they were waiting for, or they saw that they thought that they saw what they wanted, right? And this is so much like our enemy, where the decision's been made. We're going to do this thing. I'm going to do this thing. I want this thing to happen, or whatever. And I remember from being a kid, we would trap a lot of our food, and all of the very best traps work by employing the same strategy: is make it look achievable. Something that they really want, set it up where it kind of looks safe, and then once they go in, bad things happen, and that's exactly what happens here. As they set out to sail, they got a little hope that was drawn in, and I know that can happen in our lives, and I'm going to do my very best not to, start any fights, because half of you would whip me, and so, but I'm going to say, sometimes this looks like a little hope in a relationship, maybe that might draw you, out, or maybe it's what you see on the news, or that might give you a little hope that, maybe it's safe to do something, or maybe it's at your work with the promotion, or whatever it is. But this is how the enemy works: is he understands that hope is our greatest weakness as a human being, and it's also one of the most incredible, strengths and things that we have. But little bit of hope, just getting the heart involved in something. The moment that hook is there, the moment you're out in open water, you're in a very vulnerable place. And so this is what happens right here. It says, before long, a wind of hurricane force called the northeaster swept down from the island. So they were like, yeah, this is nice. We got a wind to our back. Let's get out there. That happened at Essenili again, but that's a different message. So, geez, yeah, got out there. That was like more of the opposite. Like, you got to do what you got to do. Keep paddling. J-stroke. But before long, a wind of hurricane force called the northeaster, it swept down the island. And the ship was caught by the storm and could not head into the wind. So we gave way and let wherever it was driven along. As we passed the lee of a small island called Cauda, we were hardly able to make the lifeboat secure. So the men hoisted it aboard, and they then passed ropes under the ship itself to hold it together. Like, man, I'm thinking about this, and like I told you already, like I'm like a geek when it comes to like really cool action-y literature, and it doesn't get better than this. Like in my mind, there's this crazy storm, like this hurricane's hitting. They're pulling stuff up, and how in the heck did they get ropes underneath the bottom of the ship? Like, how do you do that? I mean, someone probably knows, but I'm thinking about that, and they're fastening it, and it says that they tightened these up so that they were afraid that, they passed the ropes under the ship itself to hold it together. Their confidence is already starting to, in the ship itself is already starting to, But because they were afraid, they were afraid that they would run aground on sandbars of Cyprus. No way in that. And they lowered the sea anchor, and the next ship, and let the ship be driven along. So he took such a violent battering from the storm that the next day they began to throw cargo overboard. On the third day, they threw the ship's tackle over the board with their own hands. Here's what's interesting, is when neither sun nor stars appeared for many days, and the storm continued raging, we finally gave up all hope of being saved. I'm going to let you apply that to the last stretch of life, exactly how you need to, and I know you need to. But the scripture is very interesting because Paul and Luke, they're on this ship here that's being led by human effort, and not just modest human effort, but excellent human effort. People who are masters of the sea, people who are leaders among leaders, and a vessel that is everything that you could ever hope to have in that situation. And in this moment, things are starting to fall off. Things are starting to fall apart. Things that used to be important are being suddenly thrown overboard, and the temperature of the people on board is shifting dramatically. It says that after, and even this, I'm going to say this. It says, and this is written by Luke. So whether it was Luke and the crew, I don't think it was Paul included in that, but it says that when neither sun nor stars appeared for many days, right? Sun gives you life, and in those days the stars gave you direction. So, yeah, sounds like quarantine to me, but we'd given up any hope of being saved. If you got COVID this year, you know what I'm talking about, But after they had gone a long time without food, Paul stood up before them and he said, "Men, you should have taken my advice." Period. See you guys next week. No. He says, "Men, you should have taken my advice and not sailed from Crete. Then you would have spared yourself this damage and this loss." Which is a good reminder, just real quick. It's a good reminder, even if you know someone's going to reject the counsel or the correction with love that you have, or whatever it is that the Lord's put on your heart, even if you know someone is going to reject that, you still need to say it in love. Because at some point, even if they don't take it now, at some point that's going to be a lifeline for them later. So if you found yourself in a position in life, and I've been here, where you're constantly giving people, you're trying your best to lead people and to help people and to love people, and you're constantly being rejected, and your advice is constantly being rejected, and your concern is being dismissed, don't worry. In the end, stuff happens, stuff goes through. That's the number one principle I've learned is surviving working with teenagers, is you have to be able to just like give them what they need. They're going to go out, they're going to fall on their face, they're going to come back in, and then they're going to know you were telling the truth. And so then you can say, "I told you so," just like this. And yeah, you look really smart. So anyway. But he goes with this. He says, but now I urge you to keep up your courage, because not one of you will be lost, only the ship will be destroyed. I'm going to drink of water real quick. I honestly, this is the only object in the entire church I'm afraid to touch through the week, because if I break this, yeah, a lot of people got saved after a couple of these drinks, so. The Holy Grail. But now I urge you to keep up your courage, because not one of you will be lost, only the ship will be be destroyed. So with everything going on, I'm going to let you apply this, like I said, to your own life. But in every situation, it's important to remember that we're all on the same ship. Whether you like somebody or you don't, or you agree with them or you don't, or they're insane, or whatever it is, we're all on the same ship. And through everything that's going on right now in the world, it's important to remember that there are a lot of frantic reactions that are happening everywhere. And our mission is not to add to that conversation. Our mission is not to increase in volume to try to match what is being said and being done in all those ways. Our job is that because of the gospel, because the gospel says not that we always win or things always go the way we want them to. The gospel says that no matter what happens in life, we already have victory, right? It doesn't matter. So what makes us significant is that we have courage. And when you have courage, you're able to give courage, right? I ain't never seen somebody who's shaking in their boots give me courage. Never happened, right? I might have so much pity for them that I might but they didn't give me courage, you know what I'm saying? And it's important to remember, this line that Paul says, keep up your courage. It reminds me a lot of Jesus, right? This is what Jesus is saying, take heart. That's like the message of Jesus. And it reminds me that you sound like your source. Paul got everything from Jesus. That's where it came from. So if you find yourself sounding, and this is for you, and this is for probably more for the person next to you, but if you sound like the world, you're of the world. And I got to say this with some grace too, but if you sound like Republican or liberal or this, that, if you sound like the same guy on the TV station, and you're only saying the same things that the guy on the TV station is saying, who is your source in this, right? You're in the middle of a storm, probably one of the biggest and most significant of your life. And I'm going to tell you right now, we can't afford to sound like the world. We can't afford to say the same exact thing. It's not going to give anybody hope. It's not going to give people courage, right? I'm just going to move on. You guys know what to do with that. So Paul goes on and says, last night an angel of God to whom I belong and whom I serve, he came beside me and he said, do not be afraid, Paul. You must stand trial before Caesar. And God has graciously given you the lives of all who sail with you. Right? So keep your courage, men. For I have faith in God that it will happen just as he told me. Nevertheless, we must run aground on some island. This is like peel your skin off crazy. Like, you're telling me that Paul and Luke most likely and an angel from God were all on this ship at one point, and a miracle did not happen. You're telling me that Paul, who is, how many miracles is documented from Paul himself, right? What's interesting here is that Paul didn't even ask him. It didn't even say that he asked for the storm to cease, right? An angel of the Lord goes on and steps on the ship in the middle of a hurricane. That's a supernatural thing, man. I don't know if hurricanes last 14 days in the wild, but or longer than that. But those three are on that ship, and a miracle didn't happen. And it makes me think that, I'm going to say this, is that a lot of really good things in life, a lot of really, really good things. In fact, all of the most powerful idols that can ever exist in our life started off being good things, right? You want to know how worship, which is such a good thing, can turn into a music idol and a performance idol, right? How is it that relationships that are God-given turn into idols, vices that will literally change the course of your life for the better or the worse, whatever. Usually the worse, honestly. You think about all of the things for me, it's like the gym. Like I have to keep on top of that because it's an opportunity in life where the world has gone so soft and I have gone so soft. I've got a desk job that, getting to go in and, push myself and challenge myself, it's a good thing. But if I'm not careful, if I keep my eyes on it too long, it becomes an idol, right? Every good thing has an idol on both sides. At the conference we were at, probably the best line that I heard through the whole thing is that our hearts as human beings, they're idol factories. And what I want to tell you guys this, and you know, we've heard a lot about politics in the last while, but there are some very good things about the Republican Party. And there are some things that we line up with. But an idol becomes an idol. A good thing becomes an idol when you put your trust in it over God, when you put your hope in it over God, when you're looking for joy in it, when you're looking for victory in it. You know, when it comes back to something built by the hands of human beings, I don't care what it is. If that is where your hope comes from, if that is what victory looks like for you, if that's where you're at, it's an idol. And I'm not saying what's going on in the country right now. I'm honestly I don't have enough perspective on all of it, like, at all to tell you this. But maybe for some people, maybe there's an idol that's getting hung up right now. Maybe you've said it yourself the last few weeks. It's not about people. It's not about keeping our eyes on people, right? So we have to guard our hearts against that. So Paul finishes off by saying, you're going to live. We're all going to live. But the ship is going to have to crash, right? We're going to have to go aground. And I guess what I want to ask you guys is are there any ships in your life? And mind you, a lot of very necessary things can become idols in our life. Things that are important, things you can't just cut off. You know, they need the ship to get across the ocean, yeah. But what I'm asking you is that are there things in your life that are so necessary or so important or you believe in and trust in so much that if God were to tell you that it's going to have to roll over and crash or sink, that you would fight him to the bitter end over it? All right? If there's something in your life, anything in your life that you'd be unwilling to let go of, if the Lord asked you to, it's an idol. So, that being said, the story gets good. Just wait, okay? On the 14th night, 2 weeks. This sounds just like quarantine. All right, you get... Yeah, Larry and Lisa right now are probably in the 14th night. There's the... It says that we were still being driven across the Adriatic Sea. That's like a paradise now. Like everyone wants to go there. When about midnight, the sailors sensed that they were approaching land. And they took soundings. I don't know what that is. Do you know what a sounding is, Jerry? So it's got nothing to do with like sound. It's just, okay, it's probably a rope, right? All right, so they took soundings. I was like, just listen or what? You know, they took soundings, and they found that the water was 120 feet deep. And a short time later, they took soundings again, and they found that it was 90 feet deep. And fearing that we would all be dashed against the rocks, they dropped 4 anchors from the stern, and they prayed for daylight. Okay. They prayed for daylight. A bunch of non-godly people, like 275 of them, prayed for daylight. Okay, that's a good response. We're going to let them have it. In an attempt to escape from the ship, however, the sailors let the lifeboat down into the sea, pretending that they were going to lower some anchors from the bow. Then Paul said to the centurion and the soldiers, "Unless these men stay with this ship, you cannot be saved." So the soldiers went, and they cut the ropes that held the lifeboat, and they let it drift away. Have you seen the shift in authority that's happened through the course of the story? Got from the guy like under deck to, maybe we should have listened to him, to, hey, the only escape we have, you need to cut it off. You need to cut that off. There's something happening here. I'm going to tell you this, just a quick note, is that I'm not saying that it was like that they all got saved or that the angel showed up and told them all to listen to Paul. But what qualified Paul, what gave Paul this authority wasn't anything supernatural. What gave him the authority is in the most terrifying moment of their life, when every skill that they ever had, when every hope that they'd ever leaned on, when everything that they thought they could depend on was falling apart in front of them, one human being got up and said, "Take courage." When you give people courage, you unlock your authority in that relationship. And it's vice versa. It happens all the time. But Paul was the one who, when you move through everything that we're going through right now as a coward, you're not going to influence people. And when you open your mouth, you sound like a baby screaming in the night. I'm just saying it. It's embarrassing. Not you guys. You guys are all great, but I mean like some people out there. It's embarrassing. Some of the most difficult nights I've had to pray through in the last year have been at the hands of watching Christians respond like children because they're terrified. You know? People who, when the sun is out, are out clapping and singing and dancing. But the moment that a little wind kicks up, you know, when you give people courage, that's the mission. We give people courage, right? And we can do that because we have a gospel. We have a message in our life. We have a confidence that comes from beyond our own experiences and our own circumstances. No matter what happens, we win. When you know that, how can you be afraid, right? When you start seeing big waves, it stops becoming about how am I going to survive this? And you start really getting excited about what God's going to man, this is going to be a good one. This is going to be a good one, right? He gets this authority. It's an authority shift, right? He's giving them courage. I mean, these people have been out there for 2 weeks, humiliated in the dark. You know, now a prisoner is in charge, you know. And even to the point, with the lifeboat, it's like cutting off. You just can't jump ship. So I know this is all really frustrating, but do your best not to check out if you haven't already. So just before dawn, Paul urged them all to eat. What a good man. He says, for the last 14 days, you have been in constant suspense and have gone without food. You haven't eaten anything. Now I urge you to take some food. You need it to survive. Practical needs here. Not one of you will lose a single hair from his head. Courage, giving him courage, giving him courage. After he said this, he took some bread and he gave thanks to God in front of all of them. Little thing. Pretty cool. Don't underestimate yourself in that. It says, then he broke it and he began to eat. And they were all encouraged and ate some food for themselves. It's our mission. This should be the essence of your character. If you're saying you're a Christ follower, that means that we become like Christ. That is the pattern. That is the image of who we become, and that is how we aspire to look like Christ. Like I said before, that's our source. We want to look like Christ. We want to sound like Christ. We want to think like Christ, right? This is Christ-type stuff. It says, altogether, there was 276 of us on board. Quite a bit. I'm surprised he counted all that. But he's a doctor, so it doesn't make me surprised. When they had eaten as much as they wanted, they lightened the ship by throwing the grain into the sea. That means the advice that he gave them, guys, this ship's going to have to go aground. We prayed for daylight. It's still not here. We're listening to a prisoner now, and this is where we're at, and all right. And then it said, here's what's next. So they did all that. They put their trust, honestly, throwing that food overboard, they put their trust in God's guy. A bunch of people who have leaned on their own skills and their own things their whole life, they put their trust in the Lord's man. Don't be surprised when it happened. You better be ready. So it said when daylight came, that's the daylight they prayed for. Probably a good testimony. They're like, remember that one time it was dark for 14-ish days, and then we did that weird thing. We prayed and asked for something as petty as daylight, and then it came. It happens, man. They did not recognize the land, though. But they saw a bay of a sandy beach where this is really fun, where they decided to run the ship aground if they could. So cutting loose the anchors, bad idea. They left them in the sea, bad idea. And at the same time, they untied the ropes that held the rudders, also a bad idea. It's all this stuff that's the opposite of what you probably would want to do to protect yourself. Then they hoisted the foresail to the wind, and they made for the beach. But the ship struck a sandbar, and they ran aground. And the bow stuck fast, and it would not move. And the stern was broken to pieces by the pounding of the surf. This is interesting. God didn't tell me this, but I think it a lot. I'm wondering why they didn't get to run the ship onto shore. Why is it a significant detail that it crashed onto this thing? And I think if it would have gotten to shore, and we're going to say, and I'm not going to paint an analogy on this that wasn't intended to be there, but we're going to say if that ship was the idol, right? Maybe if they would have gotten it to shore, they would have been tempted to patch it up and roll back out. But just watch what God does in this. It says, then the soldiers planned to kill the prisoners, jerks, to prevent any of them from swimming away and escaping. That's being legalistic, but it's expected of soldiers, Roman soldiers. I love soldiers. But the centurion wanted to spare Paul's life, and he kept them from carrying out their plan. He ordered those who could not swim to jump overboard first, or who could swim. I can't believe there were people on this boat that couldn't swim. How do you give courage to people in that situation that can't swim? Yeah. They were probably the ones that were trying to get the lifeboat going, honestly. He ordered those who could swim to jump overboard first and get to land, and the rest were to get there on planks or other pieces of the ship. In this way, everyone reached land safely. All right, it's God's favor in this. I'm going to read through the rest of this super quick. How am I doing on time, by the way? I know you don't care. All right. Once safely on shore, here's where things get cool. Well, that's been cool the whole time, but this is cool. Once safely on shore, we found out that the island was called Malta. And the islanders there showed us an unusual kindness. That's more favor of the Lord. They built us a fire and they welcomed us, all because it was raining and cold. Right? So it was in response to the adversity that they were in, like all these people. It was a response to the adversity they were in and how they were handling it, that people that didn't even know them reached out and loved them and took care of them, right? Paul gathered a pile of brushwood, and as he put it in the fire, a viper, driven out by the heat, fastened itself to his hand. You were talking about that the other day. Me and Jay were. There's not a day off for the enemy, so. When the islanders saw that the snake was hanging from his hand, they said to each other, "This man must be a murderer, for though he escaped from the sea, the goddess Justice has not allowed him to live." But Paul shook the snake off into the fire, and he suffered no ill effects. The people expected to see him swell up or suddenly fall dead, but after waiting a long time and seeing nothing unusual happen to him, they changed their minds and decided he was a god. Okay, this is a cool story, guys. This guy went from prisoner to like temporary captain of a sea vessel, like a mighty sea vessel, and in the throes, and it's in a fight to the death with a hurricane. Yeah, to a shipwreck, to getting, it's great. Now he went from captive to a deity in the blink of an eye. Welcome to Rome, like welcome to Italy, honestly, like, geez. But I will say, jokes aside, it is important when you're looking at this, is that your response to the attacks of the enemies is usually a pretty good indicator of your measure of faith. So if Paul would have been bit by the snake and then started lamenting and started, flipping around on the ground and begging for his life, he wouldn't have got called a deity, that's for sure, but his faith in the Lord wouldn't have been where it's at. But he kept his thing up, he kept stoking the fire, and it moved on. So remember in yourself, when the enemy attacks you, the way you handle it doesn't matter to God, because you're not going to move him, but it might affect the way that you're able to deal with other people and help other people. And so just keep that in mind, because you're probably going to, by the time you get to lunch today, someone's going to get bit by a snake. So keep that in mind. Especially down at your house. That's why he's got to. There was an estate nearby. I'm almost done with this. You guys, this is good. There's an estate nearby that belonged to Publius. What a name. The chief official of the island. And he welcomed us to his home, and he showed us generous hospitality for 3 days. His father was sick in bed, suffering from a fever and dysentery. Paul went in to see him, and after prayer, he placed his hands on him, and he healed him. When this had happened, the rest of the sick on the island came, and they were cured. They honored us in so many ways, and when we were ready to sail, they furnished us with the supplies that we needed. This is really cool, and this is what if when we're in the middle of a storm and we're rolling up toward a shipwreck in our life, or things aren't going the way that we really want them to or expect them to, or we're praying for them to, what would it be like if we started trusting that the Lord can take what the enemy means for evil and use it for good, for real? Like, what if in order for miracles to happen tomorrow, or for salvations to happen tomorrow, what if we have to lose something really important to us today? Are you willing for that? I'm not trying to say and I hope I'm not coming across from a defeated position at all, because that is far from what it is. At all. But I think when you realize that, think of the influence, think of what happened. This is a leader of an island, and then all of the sick of an entire island who thought this guy was, like a deity, or thought that the goddess of justice had tried to kill him, right? on the heels of one of the most like devastating losses of that crew's existence, and that situation's would get quite terrible, to roll up on the shore, not have the miracle that they prayed for to save the ship or to get through that. And it's obviously a deep contrast from what happened with Jesus. Jesus was asleep. He got up. He spoke to the storm. The storm was gone. It was a weird terror for people in those days, right? That didn't happen in this situation. And weigh this for yourself, but maybe we've heard too many sermons about speaking to the storm and telling it to stop blowing, and maybe we haven't thought enough about what God is trying to do through it, or what God can do through the storm. You guys get what I'm saying in that? So the power of the gospel isn't I'm believing that if I wait long enough, it's going to look the way that I think it will. The power of the gospel and faith means that whether I sink, whether I swim, whether the ship crashes, whether the storm stops, no matter what happens, God is in it. God is active, and he wins every single day. Every single day in every single situation. That gives you a confidence to know that every snake that is out there right now, that's latched onto somebody, is going to finish up in a fire pit, right? And I'm just going to trust that the Lord's going to take care of that. And I'm not going to lose sleep over it, right? It's an incredible impact. An entire island changed at this point. And then the best part of the story, after 3 months, we put out to sea in a ship that had wintered in the island. It was an Alexandrian ship with a figurehead of Castor and Pollux. So what was taken from them actually was given back. And I did do a little digging and a little research, and they believed that this second ship, it would have been a grain ship, would have been significantly larger, and even more than the vessel they were on before. And so I bet you those that still had a little, like some trust issues with the ocean, probably felt a little better, or the sea being on that ship. But God will restore things, and in the place of what's destroyed, good things can come. And I think as well, from the perspective of idols, is that sometimes God needs to crash an idol in your life so that it can die, so that you can reevaluate, get your relationship with the Lord back on track, and then he'll actually raise that good thing back up. I've seen that happen in my life so many times where I feel like, okay, because that became an idol in my life, now I'm never going to, God can never trust me with it again. But with maturity and with patience and with trusting in the Lord, he raises something up in its place. And now you're able to learn, and you're able to learn from what happened before, and you're able to do that healthily. Does that make sense? God doesn't just take and break, okay? He restores things. He gives things, right? So it says that we put in at Syracuse, and we stayed there 3 days. I think that's in New York. For there we set sail and arrived at Rhegium. I think that's in Skyrim, but only the young guys will laugh at that. Thanks, guys, for not laughing. The next day, the south wind came up, and the following day, we reached Puteoli. Oh, is it up there? No. Puteoli. That sounds like it's from Olive Garden. Okay, the south wind must have been nice. It really would have. They got a south wind when they needed to. I don't know about you guys, but when you're on the back end of a really just like treacherous trip, I remember that last one when we were paddling this year with Jerry or at Jerry's place up in the Boundary Waters. It had just been like really nice to start, which felt like a trap now that I look back at it. And then it was like very treacherous the whole way, but I still enjoyed it quite a bit. But then like the last couple miles, it was just serenity, nice gentle little breeze like at your back, and you're just like, man, I'm so glad I'm here, you know? And sometimes, like, it's that moment when you take that crazy, difficult hike and you just get at the top and you just get to sit for a second, and the breeze blows on your sweat, and you're like, man, God is real, you know? And you're just like, this is good, you know? This is what happens for them. Peace is restored, favor is restored, joy is restored, right? It says that we arrived in Rhegium, and the next day the south wind came up, and on the following day we reached that place. There we found some brothers and sisters who invited us to spend a week with them. And so we came to Rome. And the brothers and the sisters there had heard that we were coming, patient people. And they traveled as far as the Forum of Appius and to the 3 taverns. That sounds like it's in a cool book. The 3 taverns to meet us. At the sight of these people, Paul thanked God, and he was encouraged. Right? That's pretty cool. He needed that. Even after all that. So don't feel like, I'm not telling you that if you don't feel courageous all the time, or if you need to be encouraged, that means that you're doing this wrong. Paul did it. He was there. And there's something about having good friends. That's what church is actually supposed to be about, is that you come and you see the people in here, right? The people who you know you're coming. That's why you got to keep coming, because we know you're coming. So when you don't come, at the sight of these people, Paul thanked God and he was encouraged. And when we got to Rome, Paul was allowed to live by himself with a soldier to guard him. This is kind of what it looks like. In my short experience being a Christian, and if you guys with the music want to get up there, is my short experience with being a Christian so far has made me realize that life as a believer and life, particularly in evangelism is everything to me. It means everything to me. And you imagine that it's like the first half of the book of Acts, where every day you leave your house and like you heal people's legs and you do miracles and you cast out demons and and all that kind of stuff. And it's just like this crazy thing. And if that's not happening, then there's something wrong with you or whatever. Like you start to think that way. But the reality is that it almost comes in these episodes where you find yourself moving through life and you find yourself being faithful every day, pursuing your relationship with the Lord and loving the people around you, loving the people you can't stand, doing the small things like that. And then there's an episode and something crazy happens. And there's a brief period where you're tested or you're challenged or you're put into a situation unexpectedly that requires the Lord. And I mean, I've probably had 10 or 20 of these where I'm just like, man, that changed my life. And what's interesting is every time you come off of that like I'm going to say mountaintop experience, every time you come off the water, you get in there, you get to port, this crazy thing just happened, and you walk back into life, and it looks just like it used to. And all the people you pass, they don't know what happened. It's the same world to them. And it's important that we remember that the same God that was with us out in the middle of the water out there, out in those storms, out in those crazy things, the same one that saw us through a shipwreck and saw us, reaching people in a place that we never expected to be. In fact, a place we never even knew existed. Like when God does those things in you, and then you go back to normal life, it's important, and give God thanks for what that is, what that was. And there's a different kind of confidence that you get to live with from that point forward. And it kind of is a bad trait. It's a good bad trait. It's a bad good trait. But you almost start getting an appetite for disaster, where you said it yourself. You said, if God's going to rain some justice down, let a little of it hit me. Because all the stuff that happens, all the significant things, man, it's when you're on fire. It's when things are crazy and things are difficult. And I just encourage you, if you're in a season in your life right now where life is calm and where you're just paddling, I would encourage you to get into deeper water. I would encourage you to pursue what the Lord has for your life. It's messy. Paul's he's genuinely praying into. He's going to get tried, and he pretty much knows he's going to get killed, because that's the point. Is he's saving this big thing, this testimony up, and he's going to go with the most, it's all over Facebook. I think most of you guys have sent it to me. He's going to be proven guilty for being a Christian, kind of thing. Like he's going to the big stage for that, and his life is going to be forfeit. But even in that, even knowing where he's going, he's trusting the Lord, and he's doing that. And so that's my encouragement to you guys, and I just pray that you guys will be able to carry that with you. And so we're going to pray real quick, and then we're going to worship. Lord, we just thank you for giving us such a nice boat, and it's served us so well. But God, I just pray right now that there wouldn't be a person in this room that would put their faith in anything other than you. God, you have done it once, you've done it twice, you've done it a million times, God, that you have continually showed yourself faithful and worthy of our trust, Lord, and you've shown yourself completely worthy of our hopes, Lord. I just pray that you would just step into the lives of the people in this room, God. I just pray right now that anybody that feels that they are out of sync with you, Lord, or anybody that feels that they've allowed themselves to be filled with terror, God, or fear, Lord, I just pray that you would give them peace in their heart, Lord God, and give them courage. I pray right now that we can walk out of this room and we can leave our egos, and we can leave our political positions, or our this or our that, or our feelings of whatever it is, Lord God, anything that would get in the way of us going out and bringing courage to somebody else, God. We know in the end of this thing, you win. God, we know in the end of this thing that you're going to be victorious, God. We know that we've got you, and it doesn't matter what happens. So, Lord, I just pray that we can live with future sight, that we would look back and be proud of the way that we handled this, God. I just love you, and I thank you for incredible stories like that and for sharing it with us. In your name, amen.